Hello everyone, today's on the next multi-network community sync. Today is June 11th. I have one topic to go over the default network stuff from the design. If you have any other topics, copy link, let me chat in chat link to the doc if you want to add your own item. I think, yeah, let's go over that. So I'm not sure you had a chance to read through the design here. This guy here on the top, but one thing that I did remove, and that was on purpose, was to then mention about the default network. The default network, basically, I'm calling it out as a network that the cluster is being created with, and I am defining it, but I have not kind of called out how that's going to work. And that was on purpose to reduce the scope of the design. I want to kind of make it as simple as possible so that we can get just focus on the API for now and the basic minimal integration with DRA. I think those are the two aspects we want to kind of define at this stage. And I completely removed any other notions about default network. I probably going to remove the kind of the definition from the terminology as well, because it might be confusing unnecessarily. And I wonder, anyone, Masaharu, I remember you, I think you've been asking about this in the doc. You have any opinion?
Yes, yes, I agree with your decision. So separate default network case. I think, yeah, it is simple uh, case. It's uh, easy to understand. I
Yeah,
think for
exactly.
fast
So,
POC. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. So basically, and it's not like we are not going to add it. It's just I want to postpone it. I want to start with this first thing and uh, and kind of establish the whole thing as a concrete kind of API to which we then can expand, right? And then we can have our enhancements proposals, and the first thing that can come in can be the default network, and yeah, we can kind of have some better planning and what's not, kind of create some backlog on what we want to do and all those. So I think that's the kind of take on this. In terms of scope, I think we did wanted to discuss on how kind of would that look like. So I think we can go over that. Let me just maybe just initial. Uh, so, but having said all this, right? We could kind of talk on uh, what the default network would look like. And I think I want to talk about the hard approach, where basically what will that mean is the whole pod network is the thing that takes over the networking, defines the networking for your pods. What does that mean is that in some ways the CNI path is disabled, or basically there's no such thing as a CNI going a such thing where if I don't specify anything in the resource, I get a default network. So this is type of cluster I would like to kind of get to, uh, so that I get only the networks, pods get only the networks when they specify them, and that's the one kind of approach. And there are multiple like problems with that, right? Because like every pod has to have a network. So how we solve that? Then The other problem would be the requirement of having a default network. And it's something, some of the aspects that I'm bringing back, this is something that we discussed back, like I think last year or even like more than a year ago. So the aspect of what if I want to change something with my default network, right? How do I do that? If I do require the network to be always there to spin up any pods, then how do I kind of migrate off of one type of a network or one configuration to the other? So that's another aspect, because the default network becomes this kind of critical element at that point in the cluster. And then other aspects is the for example, if I connect a pod to a non-default network, right? Because that's where this is heading towards, right? I go to the stage where if I connect only to the pods that I specify, I can connect to the non-default network only as well. And there are consequences because of those. Something that we need to look in on terms of like the other Kubernetes capabilities that are there and we might not think of, but how they're gonna behave. And some of those are I think we have them listed out in the requirements in the initial kind of PR. I think this doc, which is the connectivity for such pods to, for example, API server, to webhooks. How do they do that, right? Because how that's gonna be kind of achieved, right? So all those kind of questions, something that we need to address here. And basically this is what that are the consequences of defining like the hard approach for the default network, right? So there is quite a lot behind it. So I think this can be again probably staged in phases where let's go just define the default pod network and then all the other aspects of what will that mean and how the other aspects of connectivity are done, right? That's something that might get as well to will require some sort of push on the OSS on the core, right, to kind of allow us to do some of those things. I heard that there is some aspect for example, in this whole thing, there is a aspect of probes that Kubelet does. There is the probing of just the default. I'm not sure what's the default probing. Is it just pinging the IP of the pod, or if you don't specify? But basically, pods have the liveness, readiness, and startup probing, which as well we'll have to kind of identify how do we do this if I have my other network is something else, not the default that kind of assumes the standard Kubernetes connectivity. Think if I were to just connect a Mac VLAN into the pod, right? And then how do I do the probing through that pod at that point, right? So that kind of aspects will have to be addressed and defined on how this can be done. I think most of this still gonna be at one point implementation specific, because it will have to be up to the driver to allow some of these. But I wonder, is there something here that we will require, as I mentioned, from the core to kind of help us with this approach, right? To kind of do some of those things. So any questions? Any other kind of aspects that I might be missing? And I think now getting back to our DRA approach, right? What would that mean? I would assume there will be a pod network called default, and it will be akin to, like, we have a default namespace. So I would kind of want to kind of create similar concept here, where we have a default pod network that basically this is the network that comes with the cluster. And basically what then ends up, how do we ensure that I always connect to that one, if that's how I want to go about this, right? If I don't specify anything in the pod explicitly, I would like to have the pod still function. So we want to kind of preserve the backward compatibility. And basically for that, I was thinking of just having some sort of a mutating webhook for the pod. What it would do, it would just see that, oh, you don't specify anything in the list in terms of pod networks. I will just inject you a default pod network there so that you can have at least that one. So for backward compatibility, right? This can be tricky right now when I think about this, because within the list, you can have other resources called out. So that will mean the webhook would have to check what are the other resources, right? And ensure that if it doesn't refer to any of the items in the claims does not refer to a pod network, only then add the default, right? Because otherwise we would want to have the mechanism where if I do specify my own set of pod networks, just keep to those, don't add by default the default, right? So that's kind of the functionality we want to achieve. So I think this one where at this point I would think about just mutating webhook, that would help with that one. It might be complex, not something that we'll have to look. I'm not sure whether there's anything better to be done here, but I think that's there is that aspect. Then this would require as well some change, something that we did discuss last week, mentioned with Mike being here on the CNI side as well, right? I'm not sure whether there is a flag in Kubelet or Containerd where you can disable CNI. I'm not sure about that one. So I wonder whether that's is there something that needs to be kind of investigated to see if we can just, I don't want to do CNI, I'm just going to do everything through NRI and just go through the DRA path, the whole thing, right? So I wonder whether that's a possibility to kind of achieve. So there is that. What else I mentioned? I think the default, the default network pod network handling, right? I am kind of reviewing some of the things that we did called out in, I think this one. If you look at this PR here, then I think some of those was kind of discussed, and this is what I'm bringing up. That's why I kind of have something in mind around this one. But the aspect of migration, this is more trickier, right? Because if you don't have default network and we have the mutating webhook in place, basically no pods will be able to start, right? Because you will have that resource in the you will have that resource in the list of your claims for the pod, but let's say your driver will not list this pod network because it was removed or something, right? So that's something that then you can get to a deadlock on the cluster, right? So we need to make sure that we are able to prevent that or be able to always have the pod network. So that's some sort of rules we'd have to kind of apply to define those. One of the migration kind of ideas was to have some sort of flags on a per node basis. So leverage node where you can kind of say that you mark the node, either just cordon it, so you drain it and then just pull it out of the pool available for the scheduler. And on a per node basis, you maybe can specify what the default network is in case you want to migrate off of one to the other. And this is where right now I mentioned before the default network, the name default would be the thing, but you want to transition from A to B, the name cannot be right away just changed. So you would have to have a means to say that, okay, for this node, the default network is full, right? So basically then it would be on a per node basis where if a pod scheduled is to the new node that's already kind of transformed and is ready for the new stuff, it will, when the webhook looks at the default, or maybe the DRI driver, when it thinks, oh, the default, but let me check the node. Oh, for this node, the default is something else. So I'm going to start attaching to that. So then kind of this is how you could migrate off of one to the other object. I think the problem would be we would lose the naming schema, right? Because you would migrate from default to foo, for example, and then your new default is named foo. So this is something that maybe not ideal. I don't know whether there is something better to do around this, but I think this will be one approach. Of course, this can be then done again to now convert the full name to default name and do another migration, which is not ideal. But I think this is a thing to do maybe. So yeah, this is kind of tricky to kind of how to do that. Some of the ideas, that's what we had about this. And I think with the DRA driver, that's kind of it boils down to as well to the implementation, just handling the whole thing, right? It's basically default network becomes like the other networks, right? And we are just plugging whatever the default is, right? Of course, then must ensure your default CNI that you used can support the array now, right? And go through the NRI path rather than CNI path. And then lastly, I think this is what we called out yesterday. What's needed is the NRI drivers are non-blocking. I think this is something that there is a issue set up for this, but something that it will have to be blocking, right? Because otherwise that's going to be bad, right? If you just it failed and the creation of the pod moves forward, so that's not kind of ideal. So that has to be kind of tweaked to do that. Any other questions around this? I'm talking a lot. I'm not sure how much I am making sense out of this, but anyone else has questions? Let me write it down here with some notes.
Maciej, I had one question. Sorry, I think I joined 5 minutes late. So although I understood the later part of the conversation, but the beginning part, I think I missed. So is the idea that we want to at least have some scope of how we'll be supporting default networks, and that is what you're trying to plan for?
Yes. So right now we're taking that. I taken this first pointer here, right, where we want to just focus on the current state of the dock, right? So it doesn't call out what the default network, how it's going to be done right now. It calls out only what it is. I'm probably going to remove that terminology out of there so that it's not confusing, because it's not referenced anywhere. So what I'm going to do is probably remove that notions from the terminology. But then we want to kind of in the name of scope reduction, and will not be part of the initial design. So basically, then the current design is only about the API and the initial integration with the array. Two simple things, right? So it's very straightforward. There is no because let's get foot in the door. I think that's where I'm getting at, and I want to kind of reduce the scope as much as I can because of this.
That makes sense. Got it. Thank you. So you're saying like it's the initial scope is regarding the API, and is it appropriate to say it's only for additional networks and not for the default network?
Currently, yes, that's what it's going to be. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the notion of the default network, we need to kind of have a separate.
I agree.
I think that's gonna be mapped. I think we're gonna create multi-network enhancements proposals. I think so. That's gonna be one of the kind of additional next designs to kind of add that default network notion and information to that.
I think that makes sense. And one of those points that you highlighted regarding the probes, I guess that has been a major point of question regarding how will non-default networks and probing work together.
Yeah, all that kind of aspects,
yes,
right?
Definitely saying that this default network is not part of the initial scope helps at least delay those discussions until a future point.
Yeah, I don't want to right because what I'm feeling is yeah, I want to get the foot in the door. I think that's my
okay,
goal.
makes sense. Right?
Yeah, and let's see how that goes from there, and then internally we can see. I need to kind of discuss with I think Antonio or some of the leads. I'm not sure how, or maybe Rob on how they do it in Gateway. Is like every single then after that design has to go through SIG Network, or then we are on our own. I'm not sure. So that then because we are a side-loaded capability, right? So we are not in core. Definitely want to kind of let everyone know what we want to do, but yeah, need to kind of figure out what is the process here. From probably gonna copy paste whatever the Gateway API is doing. So we are they are doing it for the last few years. So just basically use that model. Any other questions? If not, then I think this is where I want to kind of stop. I don't have anything else. Any other topics? Anyone?
Nothing from me.
Going once, going twice. All right. Thanks, folks, and let's meet next week and see. Please, as I mentioned, I think I called it out on the chat. This first link on the top contains the current approach. Please give it a read, leave comments, review. This is what we are currently kind of heading towards, and what we want to propose and start with in terms of like the official multi-network APIs and approach for integration with the array. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you next week.